Hello and welcome to the channel, and welcome to the start of a new series. In this one we're going to be testing out some of the most hated pieces of guitar gear to find out whether it really deserves the hate and there's nothing for it but to get smashed, or whether the hate is less deserved and really it should be given a pass. Welcome to Smash or Pass. We're going to be starting off this series with an amp that definitely has a reputation, especially for its insane setting, but as is with this series, a reputation that isn't necessarily a good one. I'm of course talking about the Line 6 Spider, and in this case we have the Spider Classic, which is a more recent version of the amp, which was released somewhere around 2016. Now, I've had experience in the past with older versions of this amp sounding horrible, but I wanted to give Line 6 some benefit of the doubt and go with a newer model to see whether they have made improvements to it over the years. So as you can see over here on the controls panel, we have quite a number of controls, as well as some built-in effects and a master control, as well as 4 presets. Now, I'm not going to be able to take you through absolutely every tone that this amp is capable of because it's just a never-ending sort of thing. With this amp being a digital modelling style, it's just got hundreds and hundreds of possibilities of various tones. So what I have done is I've gone through the 4 presets, tuned them to what I think to be decent sounds, and sounds that do show this amp in its best light because we want to be fair. And I'll take you through those tones as well as some of the effects and we'll see what we get. Today I am playing a Fender Telecaster into the amp obviously, which is just mic'd up with a single SM57. Of course you're hearing that on your end completely unprocessed other than what YouTube does to it. So starting off on the clean channel, and that sounds something like this. So off the bat, it's a pretty good clean tone. It's nice and bright the way I like it, and you know, that's fairly usable. Although, saying that, solid state and digital amps always tend to get the clean tones pretty right. While we're on the clean setting, let's take a look at the effects we've got in here as well. So we have these 2 smart effects controls, one of which gives you sort of modulation style effects, and one of which gives you sort of reverbs and delays. So let's start off with the modulations and dial in some of this chorus flanger. As is often the case with amps like this, you have multiple effects on the same knob and they're divided into sections. The further you get into that segment, the more intense the effect gets. For the sake of demonstration, we'll keep them all pretty intense just to give you a solid idea and so you can really clearly hear the effect. So, chorus flange. So that's pretty cool, and if we throw some reverb onto that as well, just to make it real nice and spacey. I really like that. I think that's a pretty solid effect. We'll leave a bit of the reverb on just to give it some more ambience, and we'll move around to the phaser. Now that's not my favourite phaser sound in the world. I tend to like a slower sort of rate, but it's still passable and usable, I think. And then finally we've got tremolo. And that sounds something like this. And again, a pretty solid effect. They're all fairly generic sounding effects for their specific sound, but it does the job, and if that's what you're after, then great. And with this amp being aimed at your sort of bedroom player or earlier guitarist, you know, having all of these effects at your disposal straight away is a nice thing to have. We'll turn the modulation off now and just take a look at these other two settings we have on the second knob for tape echo and sweep echo. And as you'll see, as I turn the knob, this button here starts to flash, which is your tap tempo. So you do have control over that with these time-based effects. The tape echo sounds something like this. Now personally I'd like the ability to throw a few extra repeats on that, but that aside, it's a pretty good sounding tape delay. Although to me it is quite digital sounding, I'm not hearing a lot of that sort of tape deterioration that you'd expect to hear from a tape delay. But that's me being fussy about a single effect in a multi-effects processor unit in a cheap amp, so hey. The last thing we have is the sweep/echo, and that sounds something like this. Now I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that, but I don't like that at all. That sounds awful. I've been trying to figure out what that sound is meant to be, and I still can't figure it out. So yeah, that's minus points for that one, but the rest of the effects, pretty solid and usable. So we've had a look at the effects and the clean tone, so now let's move on to the crunch tone and see what that's like. So that's a fairly alright crunch tone. It's getting a little bit fuzzy, and I think that might have something to do with the fact that this is a very small speaker. It's only a little 8-inch speaker, which doesn't seem to handle the high end or the distortion all that well. But you know, for bedroom playing, it's passable, and hopefully it comes through fairly accurately through the mic. Now for these next two, and what you really probably think of when you think of a Line 6 Spider, I'm going to switch over to some humbuckers, because next up we've got the Metal and the Insane channels. So this is my PRS S2 single cut, and it is in drop C. And on the Metal sound, it sounds something like this. Now I wouldn't necessarily call that a metal tone. I find that it works better for that sort of American style of hard rock, a bit like Alter Bridge, like what I was just playing. But in the room, it's, you know, it's a solid high gain tone considering the circumstances. Now am I going to run out tomorrow and start recording all of my high gain tones with this amp? No, but that's not what this amp's for. It is for playing in your bedroom, playing along with tracks, and I think for that purpose it serves it pretty well. And I've been pleasantly surprised with this high gain tone, but the real decider will be the one that it's most infamous for, and that is of course its insane setting. So let's check that out. Now that's certainly not as bad as I remember it being from a few years ago. Now whether that truly is because this amp has improved over its predecessors, or whether that's just because I've got better at dialing in tones, I couldn't tell you, but it's not as horrible as I remember it being. Now, like I said earlier, this little speaker does struggle a little bit with the higher gain tones, but then you come to expect that. So I do think this amp could definitely benefit from a bit of modding and an upgraded speaker. But all in all, I've actually been fairly pleasantly surprised by this little amp. And so that brings us on to the all-important question. Smash or pass, what do we think of this amp? And I have to say, I'm disappointed. I bought this amp thinking that it would be pretty bad and that we could get this series off to start with a smash, but I can't bring myself to do it. I don't think it's bad enough. I think actually it's pretty solid. Of course, no one's going to be going out tomorrow and replacing their incredible high-end valve amps with this, of course not. But for what it is, and compared to its predecessors, I think it's a solid amp. And for the bedroom player and the people that this amp is targeted at, it will do the job pretty damn well, and it would give the competitors a run for its money. So I'm sorry to disappoint there on this first episode, but in this case, this amp gets a pass from me. Now, of course, be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and more importantly, let me know what you want to see on this series next. Which pieces of gear do you absolutely hate and would like to see facing the hammer? But for episode 1, that's going to do us. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.